أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, to the show, Think About It. Today I'd like to focus on something that might not have much focus in our daily conversations or even our minds. We focus a lot on modern technology today. We focus on the latest mobile phones that are out, computers, laptops, small microphones, chips, and all these different things. And we're always waiting for new developments within this piece of technology. We also focus on modern cities, the design of cities. We have a lot of people who complain about city planning. You have people who want great infrastructures, they want bridges to be passing by, overpasses to take place, and a system to be put in place. And everybody's working for the betterment of the city design. And people also take a look at modern residential buildings and homes. So what people end up doing is they want to go out and get a house, on whether they want to purchase a house, rent a house. They pay a lot of attention to the design of the house. 9-foot ceilings are a new phenomenon that we've been hearing about in the market. They want to have a good backyard. They want to make sure that they have amenities in their house and things are very modern. They don't rust quickly. They have a new style to them as well. But do we focus on modern community? Do we think about community today? And is it something that is worth thinking about and pressing a concern about as well? Today, dear viewers, I'd like to talk about the modern community, as you can see below. What has happened to the modern community? We're talking about neighborhoods, streets, people who live next to you, people who live besides you, people who live 2 streets away from you. We're talking about people who live within your constituency, whether you live in a small town or a big city. Do we know about our community? And what does the modern community look like today? I have with me a wonderful professional educator, and mashallah, he is a teacher at school of Islamic education and sciences, a person who's definitely a member of the modern community, someone who I would like to discuss what's happening within our community, what it looks like today, probably get some, and also express some of my own opinions and views and ideas. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Ghassan, how are you today?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm very well. And
thank you for being on the show today. Alhamdulillah, I'm all right. And so basically, my main idea is to talk about what is happening with community today, how it looks like, and whether there is a need for improvement. I mean, we always say that there's always a need for improvement in different facets of life, whether it be professions, whether it be activities that you do, exercises, hobbies that you hold, and systems. But does community get enough focus today? So I guess my first question is, can people depend on their neighbors nowadays?
I think I would answer that with a no, but not out of a sinister reasoning, but more because people tend to have a bit of a barrier to taking the first step. And when they're unfamiliar with someone or something, they don't really want to approach it. So in the broader sense, because we're not having so much interactions, people aren't very dependable until we kind of take the first step towards them. And once you do that, that tends to make people a little bit more dependable and helpful towards each other.
So you mentioned unfamiliarity. Now that's a pretty big word to use. The question is that, has the unfamiliar become something that you're not comfortable approaching anymore? Unfamiliar doesn't necessarily mean something negative or derogatory, but why is it that when people don't know or don't understand something, they're afraid to, for the lack of a better word, approach it? In this case, neighbors, people in your community, people who live in your city. Why is this gap there? Why has a perception of, I cannot approach something that I do not know?
I think the idea is people are more comfortable when they know what the outcome is going to be. And when you haven't had the chance to interact with someone, then you're worried that if I do this or if I do that, then how is this person going to perceive it? And then they choose just not to touch that area of not knowing, because that's where the discomfort comes from.
That's interesting, because I guess I would have to say that interaction between people nowadays is definitely reduced, and quite heavily, in fact. I mean, you wouldn't stop your car in the middle of a road, or when you're standing at a traffic light, look towards the person to the left of you or the right to you and just, even wave towards them nowadays. And I mean, in my perception, I've seen myself that the very street that I live on, I remember the first time I moved to my residence, I was unpacking and I had parked my car and I looked across the street and there was somebody who was obviously a person who'd been living there longer than I had. It was like a few hours for me to be in that position and in that location. And I just said, "Hi, neighbor," and I raised my hand and I waved it. And they did wave back, but there was a sense of, there was a look on their face as though, why? Why does that look exist today?
I think it's exactly for that reason of unfamiliarity, even with the action of taking that step forward, because it takes just one act to bring a person to become a little more familiar with you. And nowadays, even people don't take the time to say hello or to wave to their neighbor. And this actually happened to myself when I moved, and we started saying hello to our neighbors, and they just looked at us kind of with a bit of a shock. Whereas on the other hand, the neighbor on our other side, we said hello, and he was very excited to say hello. So even with the unfamiliarity of someone saying, "You don't know me," and you're still taking that step to recognize me and to just even greet me is surprising to people now, because it's become such an abnormal thing.
But should it be an abnormal thing? That's the question.
I think absolutely not. It shouldn't be, because this is someone you're living right next to. You're sharing a space with them. If you have children and they have children, they might be playing together. They might be going to the same school together. So it only becomes a kind of necessity that you know who is living around you and who is the parents of the children that your children will be playing with.
Now, I can say that, I can give people a bit of leeway, and I can understand when you don't know people within your city if your city's too big. You don't know people within a constituency because you're busy with your daily life. You don't get to meet a lot of people very often. But the very points that you've mentioned, you have public areas, especially with Phase 3 now in place, people being able to go to parks and different recreation centers and places where basically you socialize. It's a very good spot to socialize. With those places open, do people within a community, when I say a community, I mean on a very street itself. I'm talking about 5 houses to one side and 5 houses to the opposite. People who share the same park, who share the same library, who share the same rec center, who have a very big probability of running into each other very often. Once a day, if not more than that. Do people in their community know each other well enough?
Just because of that lack of taking that first step, the steps that come after that just don't happen because of those barriers. So we tend to not realize that our neighbors have the kind of same problems as us. And it becomes another barrier because we start making assumptions, maybe because of the car we see them driving, their house, how they're maintaining their lawns, how often we see them going in and out. And when we put these assumptions in our head, we don't feel the need to actually find out what's going on because we already have something in that place. So we may even think we know what our community, but we don't actually know because we're just filling in the blanks on our own without those interactions, without those greetings.
You've actually mentioned something that is, I won't say it's peculiar, but I'd say that it's a point that's worth noting. You said that appearance of things, so how their lawn might appear, what car they drive, what clothes they might have on. Now, this isn't really about modern society or community, but just to look at another angle of it. Has the world and modern community today encouraged people to move towards a more materialistic approach than a more human approach?
Absolutely. We started understanding people and even the environment and our own happiness through things rather than through experiences with people and communicating with people. So we understand the language of things more than we understand the language of people now.
A few weeks ago, we had the MP of Milton, the Member of Parliament of Milton, Adam Von Coverden, on the show. And I was talking to him and we asked him a few questions about community as well. And he mentioned that he had to go door to door to find out what people wanted in an MP, what people wanted in their representative in the House of Commons and in Parliament, basically. And he was like, he had to find out, and it wasn't very easy to go about and find out what's going on. And to that, I also asked a question about how people can find out what's happening within their community. Now, I'm somebody who lives within the constituency of Milton. And I'll be honest with you, there are about 111,000 people, give or take, within Milton. But I can guarantee you that when an MP or somebody who is of, let's say, a government position or someone who has the authority or the power to promote change or support it, if not actually implement it. A lot of people say that we put out advertisements on some people who required help within the community, a person who couldn't afford, let's say, an electronic wheelchair, and they were going on a normal wheelchair, and the community got together, pitched in, and this person actually received and got enough funding to get that. And when I hear this news and when I see this, I think to myself, how did I not know about this? Where do you go to find this out? I mean, not everybody is an avid social media user. Not everybody goes on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, look at live feeds and find out what's going on. Some people are just that busy in their life. I mean, they go to work, and when they get time, they either spend it with family, they rest, or they find other streams of revenue that they could actually get into. So are people within a community, I mean, my own take is that even with 111,000 people living, that's not a very big city. It's a small city. It's a beautiful city, in fact. It's a lovely constituency. At least 40,000 people have no idea of who needs help, how to help, what's going on, if there are potluck barbecues, if there's a place to socialize with people. They don't know. They have no knowledge. They want to know. It's not that they're, avoiding it. They want to be a part of the community. They just don't know where to look. And regardless of how fast track, I mean, there are a lot of people who use social media applications nowadays. I mean, people use TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. I'm not an avid user of these social media platforms. A person who is an avid user and has been using them for at least a year or two now, if they tell me, oh, just put this filter on it, it's as though you're talking to somebody who doesn't, it's like if I've never driven a car before, you're like, oh, just put it into drive. I'm like, how do you do that? So for them, it might be something that's simple. All right, and they're like, oh, you just go on media, go on social media, go on Facebook, you'll see it, it's happening there, just go on this, do this, email this particular person, you'll find out, how do I get that email? What do if I have a Facebook account, what do I write on top to find out what's going on? How can I tap into that community, find out what's happening? So are there people within your constituency that you feel are unaware of what's happening within the constituency, whether there be good developments or areas where people could actually provide support? They want to, but they don't know where to. Is that the case within your constituency as well?
I think absolutely these people exist because they don't have that kind of connection with the communication of their community, whether it's a communication through technology or if it's through hearsay, through word of mouth, because those interactions just don't happen as much anymore. And it goes back to the idea of taking that first step, just saying hello and beginning the conversation with people, even to the extent beginning that conversation through technology, through these apps. And to make people more comfortable with that, to make it known that if you want to be part of the community, if you want to help the community, you need to put a step forward, and then you'll get to know. For information doesn't simply come to your door, it doesn't simply come on your phone, you have to turn your phone on to see it. But there's definitely people who don't have that kind of access to it just because they're not using these technologies, because they're not going out there. They're going out for these revenue streams, and then maybe they're coming home, but they're not going to the community centers. They're not going to the park and just having a conversation with their neighbors, and then that information just doesn't get passed along to them. But they definitely do want to help, and they do want to get involved, and it's just a matter of getting in touch in terms of communication with community, and that's why those words kind of are based from the same root.
Now, I'm pretty sure that we have many viewers who are millennials as well and young minds, and people who probably are listening to us talk about the modern society, the modern community, the way it is, and the issues that it faces, and might be saying that that's normal, because it has normalized, in fact. Not interacting with people who live close to you, who are within your city, your town, your street, has become something that is not frowned upon, even though I think it should be frowned upon, that if you're not socializing with people, then what's the point of being a part of society? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make no mistake, has given all of us the ability to be a benefit to society. And what Brother Ghassan has just said, and I agree with as well, is that we definitely do have to make an effort, but at times when people don't know how to make an effort, I think that certain amounts of, like, let's say training or sessions or awareness, let's say presentations, Let's say that, I mean, a lot of people, when we go around and we see advertisements behind buses and trucks and public transportation about real estate, about, buying cars and leasing things, and you have different names mentioned there too, it's all well and good. But if this type of information is there as well, for a layman who's not an avid user of those platforms which are an access to this world of information where you can be a support and be a part of community, that would actually be a lead-in for them. That would actually hit them where they could actually turn it into something. They could actually do something. But now I'm going to go to another direction when you talked about community as well, and I think this is something that's important. Now, for me, I moved to Canada recently, and when I came to Canada, prior to coming, I had heard a lot about integration courses. And you can go and you can find out how to integrate within the Canadian community, understand one another, and become a part of Canadian society. Beautiful and great. But here's the thing. I landed at the airport. All the paperwork went through. I went down to the CBSA, the officers that are there, the Canadian Border Service Agency, signed a couple of papers, goods to follow, things to come. I came outside. I've had family in Canada for a while. They were waiting for me. I went home. We started talking about, what are you going to do? How's life going to go? Do you have any ideas? Have you applied to any jobs? And da-da-da. And it was all about how am I going to make it and find stability in my life in terms of my financial needs. Mm-hmm. Not once did I go to an integration session or training, and not once did I get an email or understand where it's taking place. Obviously, I could have Googled where it's happening, but I wasn't too bothered about it either. I'll be absolutely frank with you. Now, there are a lot of people who come. Now, we're talking about the globalization as well in terms of the modern community. I mean, our communities are not just people who've been living here for, let's say, 3-4 generations or even more than that. We're talking about people who are coming up to your shores today. COVID is happening, things have opened up, there are asylum seekers who are coming, there are people who have applied for express entry, they're coming into the country, they're finding places to live, they're finding residential areas, they're coming into a new place. Some of them may not speak the language to the proficiency where it's easy for them to get by. Some of them might be very fluent, some of them don't know the system at all, some of them might know the system. But there's a lack of integration. What ends up happening is that somebody from a particular background who's to come here, they end up meeting people with a similar background and start hanging out with them instead of integrating and finding out about other pieces and facets of society who are your pillars, in fact. So for somebody who is a Canadian, now for me, a person, regardless of your background, your ethnicity, whatever, we're running for the same team. We're people who are a part of the same society, a part of the same community. But there's something about the modern community and what it encourages is that you stick to what you know instead of getting integrated. Make no mistake, the government of Canada, other governments which are promoting immigration are definitely sending that message out that you should integrate and you should meet people. And this is, they set courses over, and definitely some people might take them. But are people voluntarily, enough people voluntarily going forward and taking integration courses so they could be a part of community today, which actually benefits society? What do you think about that, Hassan?
The aspect of wanting to integrate, to having to go out, like you said yourself, you weren't really bothered by it and you didn't receive a message. And then you have the few people that are trying to do that. But when you don't see it happening in the society where people are going out of their way, even if it's just to say hello, when you don't see other people doing that, you don't feel like that's what the society is doing. We're inclined to do what's happening around us, and we don't see people approaching unfamiliarity to the extent where it's like, this person is from a different culture and that's unfamiliar and I don't want to speak to them about it. I remember speaking to a Somali sister, Somali Muslim woman about how her culture was, and I was talking to her about Pakistani culture as well as just, you know, my general growth in my own personal culture and in Canada. And even though we're both Muslim, she was so shocked at what practices I had and my culture had, and I was shocked about hers. But a little less so than she was, because she said, oh, I didn't know that other Muslims had different views than Somalis did about this thing and that thing. And it was surprising because I spent the past 7 years in Hamilton, and it's a very diverse community, and
Subhanallah.
everybody is just mixing. You have all these different people meeting at the masjid, meeting at community centers, meeting in schools, yet you still have this gap of not knowing, not being familiar, and not taking that step to get to know what's going on. And
Subhanallah.
it goes back to that simple hello. We don't say hello to someone or something that's strange to us, and then we don't get to benefit from everything that comes after us.
Before I flip the story over now and we start looking at things in a different light, I have to say that the example that you just mentioned, the experience that you had, even in the Quran, it says, I mean, in a hadith that are there, we're told by our beautiful religion, أَفَلَا تَتَفَكِّرُونَ, do you not think? And thinking is a way of expanding your mind, being more, or at least further educated. And when we meet people from different backgrounds, you're part of the same community now, make no mistake. It doesn't matter where you came from, what you did, you're part of the same community. If you talk to each other and you get to learn about them, that hello that's missing, that link that's missing right there, if we actually make that effort and have that happen, what ends up happening is that we end up educating ourselves, probably growing further respect for other people, knowing what cultural appropriacy is, how to deal with people within a similar community, all right? Whether they be of different faiths, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, or similar ones as well, but have some common things which might not be so common. But now I'm going to flip things around. So a lot of the millennials are watching this, a lot of people who are probably used to how community is now, and they might be looking at us and saying, what else is new? Was community and community ties, were they in the past different to what they are today?
I feel like they certainly were. People tended to interact a lot more because of their need to do so. They didn't have other kind of distractions, but definitely because everything was reliant on who your neighbor was. You would work with the same people and you would have a kind of forced interaction with them, and that developed interactions on things that were outside of that need, outside of I'm going to this grocery store and trying to purchase something. So communities were definitely a lot more reliant on the people who are directly next to them, whether it was related to work or it was simply, you know, keeping the properties clean and all of that stuff. There was a lot more of that tight-knitness going on in previous...
I'll share a story with you that I also shared previously in my show with the interview that I had. And I mentioned that a person who was an internet technician, he came over my place, and his name was Mike. And we started talking, and one thing led to another. We kind of hit it off, and we were talking about different things. And born bred Canadian, and I asked him how Canada used to be. And he tells me that I remember vividly that when I was young and I was a kid, I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and you'd be at home, you'd be playing on your front lawn or the patio, and you'd see your neighbor pull up and they'd have like lots of bags of groceries and they'd done something. And without question, you would cross the street or, you know, go to the house next to you, and you'd help them, and they'd smile back and you'd say hi, hello. There was an unconditional kind of, you know, force within you that would make you a benefit to society. And he said that that doesn't exist today. And he said that I'm seeing Canada, well, his words were that, you know, he's seeing some kind of deterioration happen. Now, obviously, strong words that people might think, but look at it from his perspective. Person grew up, you'd help each other out without even asking. You'd be there, you know, somebody's picking up a bag and someone else would come, oh no, allow me, let me. And just that feeling of, oh, he's got my back. I've got a community I can rely on, people I can depend on. You like living in that society all of a sudden. You like living with those people all of a sudden. And I guess another thing is, another point that should be, you know, highlighted is that you could go to people's houses unannounced. Ring the doorbell, they'd open up the door, the whole family would show up at the door. Kids would show up at the door, parents and whatever, and they'd open up the door, they'd look at you, whether you were somebody who was unknown, a family friend, you're coming from somewhere, and they'd welcome you. You'd have company to deal with, to entertain yourselves with, to entertain other people with. And is that today? Now, this small example that I've given to you, I mean, I know the answer to it, but I do want to know your perspective of it, is that piece of, let's say, value of community, company, society. First off, I'd like to know, why is it not here anymore? Why don't we have it anymore? Secondly, I want to know, how important was it? And was it healthy, or is it something that it's good, we don't have it anymore? What's your perception on that?
I really strongly believe it's about how we have begun to spend our time, especially our free time, going back to how before we used to go out, we used to play in the lawn, and we would see other kids playing, and if they were playing the same thing, we would want to join them, or they'd want to join us. We would know our neighbors' kids. We would play with them. When I was young, all the neighborhood kids were my friends, and now we seek entertainment more from technology. In the past 20 years, when I was growing up, I'm 26 now, and when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I didn't have a phone, I didn't have an iPad or anything. I could barely use the computer. So my pastime would be to go out of the house, and that would force me to interact with people. And now, even when, for adults, when you want to buy something, you can just order it on Amazon. You don't have that interaction of going to the store and speaking to one of the people working there and having that interaction. Even at grocery stores now, you have self-checkouts. You don't even have to interact with cashiers anymore that much. Right. Or when you're trying to order food, you don't even need to pick up the phone. You can order it from that. So really, I think what has caused this disconnect from people is just that lack of interaction. And when you are taken away from that, you lose the benefits you get from it, or knowing the benefits from it.
So is technology, as great as it is, the culprit for breaking community and making us interact less?
I think it's one of the causations for it. We can't blame it completely, but when we start replacing the activities that involve people and that connection with people through their presence, and we start, maybe texting people, I'm sure young people can understand how much they hate calling over texting, and you just constantly start delegating things to a screen rather than to a face, to a voice, and to that presence. So technology is not the culprit, but rather how we choose to use technology is more of the culprit behind this.
So we've basically prioritized technology much more than it should be. Am I right there?
Absolutely, but not because we forgot about it, but because we didn't see the consequences of bringing technology in to replace our interactions.
So we've talked about all the things that might not be very pleasant about the modern community today. We've talked about how community was in the past. What can we do today that might help us overcome the issues or the unpleasantness of society and the modern community that is today?
So it's a really interesting point to make, and at a time like this when there's COVID going on, you actually see people, because they're so distanced from each other, that they realize that lack, and they're starting to meet each other. They're starting to spend more time with their families and away from phones. So I think we really need to start having periods where we black out technology from our lives, where we turn off the TV and we put our phone aside and say, I'm not going to look at this, so that we have that moment to really interact with people and really see how much we have to benefit from that, from their stories and what they have to share, and to get out a little more, to go grocery shopping, not to just go on Instacart, maybe to go a little bit even window shopping, go to the mall, and not just get things on Amazon, as easy as it is.
Now, Brother Ghassan has made a very interesting point here, and I think everybody should pretty much take a look at this because it's a lesson. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard the saying that you never know how good you have it until it's gone. So I think COVID, as you mentioned, is something that has made people realize the lack of interaction that takes place. And it's made them realize how good interaction was for them, or is for them rather. And I think we can capitalize on this. I mean, we've got a lesson that we have in our hands, that COVID has made people interact less. Obviously, there's social distancing going on. Nobody's asking you to go and hug people or whatever the case is, but interaction doesn't necessarily mean hugging. Interaction means the sharing of ideas, like what we're doing right now. legally social distancing apart. You guys can do it too. Just telling you, something to think about. But anyways, my point is that we should take this moment of realization and capitalize on it. So I would say that with modern community, I mean, please do add on if you can, and let me know if my idea is any, worth it or pretty good or not. I think we should be able to, I mean, now that we know that we had it pretty good, but we took it for granted and we didn't interact with people much, a good thing, even at an Islamic point of view, within the hudud of Islam, we could see that if your neighbor comes home and we try, make that effort, like your neighbor stops by, even saying hi to them, saying salam to them if you know that they're from the same faith of you that you hold as well. But to talk to one another, whether it be at a distance, it doesn't matter. Whether it be over the phone, it doesn't matter. Whether it be over texting, you can use technology, dear viewers, young people. But if you start interacting more with people and you try to find ways to interact with people today, I think it opens up room for discussion. And obviously there are a lot of things that we can talk about. There are a lot of topics out there. I mean, you can talk about the pandemic itself and what precautionary measurements people are taking now that phase 3 has happened. Inshallah, we pray that another wave doesn't come. But inshallah khair, we also need to be ready and prepared if in case, bidnillah, inshallah khair, a second wave does come. So with that, I think that people need to pass compliments more to one another. I mean, just saying, hi, I like the way you cleaned your car today, man. Oh, awesome cleaning. Where'd you get that, Kleenex from, or whatever product he's used to clean his car? Or whether somebody's mowing their lawn, oh, my machine, I'm thinking about getting a new one. Just for the sake of conversation. If you have a conversation for the sake of conversation, I think, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it opens room to build relationships. Am I right?
I think that's absolutely true, because it's getting rid of that discomfort is all about replacing it with another feeling. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that do not undervalue any good deed, even smiling is charity. And, alhamdulillah, outside we can go out and walk around without masks, so people can still see our smiles. But when we're grocery shopping and we're just seeing people, they say that a true smile is with the eyes and not just the mouth. But we can greet people and say good morning, good evening, and just through our voice, our tone, they can understand that. And people are empathetic creatures. They feel that happiness you're portraying to them, and that gets rid of all that issue of unfamiliarity, because when someone is treating you nicely, as they say, a smile is contagious. Good feelings are also contagious. And once you put that in their heart, then they go, this person has made me feel good, and you begin to like them, and then it just starts breaking all those barriers.
It builds, yeah. I think it builds on and develops. Now, I'm going to share another piece of advice for our dear viewers, and something that we hope, could be a benefit to society. And if you would take this advice, you can also obviously send us an email, let us know what you think. Give us a call, let us know what you think. And let's try to portray your voice. I would say that at times we cook meals at home, and COVID has made us cook quite a lot of meals at home, I'd say. And people are eating more healthier than they were before. And what if, in Ramadan, I remember since I was a child, living in the Middle East or in Pakistan, my mother would make it a purpose that in Ramadan, our entire neighborhood, at least our entire street, would have had iftar from us. So my mother would have a tray made, and me, my brother, and my sisters would be, just going up and down the street. We was obviously we weren't that really happy about it, because it felt more of a chore than anything else. But it was awesome because, you go up to somebody's house, you'd ring their doorbell, they'd come outside, and you'd be like, Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem, and you'd give them a tray, and they'd feel humbled and nice as well, and then they'd reciprocate. And then what would end up happening is that all of a sudden relationships would be built. So, you'd be walking down the street and somebody would say, hey, hi, how's it going? I remember it was right about a year or two after that Ramadan where we distributed meals to people. A good year or two down the line, I was on the road. So it was near my community. It was near the very colony where I was living, but it was one of the main roads that took you to the highway. And I was there with my brother, and I think we had a flat tire, I'm not sure, but there was an issue. And a car stopped, And they said, "Oh, is everything all right?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, we're just," and they started helping us. They came and they like, "Oh, let us help you out." Da, da, da. And this person looked very familiar, but I couldn't place him in my head. And then I realized it was a person that we had shared a meal with. And I think that, I mean, Ramadan is a beautiful excuse and a wonderful way for us to kind of reflect on who we are and start acting and, you know, trying to pile up on our good deeds. But what if we incorporate that, you know, that ajr that we want and that sadqa jariyah that we want in everyday practice? So I'm not saying every day, but like once in a while, if you cook a meal and, you know, like you cook pasta at home, or let's say biryani or something that, you know that you're good at cooking, or that your family's good at cooking. Just like, you know, a plate or two, make a small meal, take a tray, go and give it to a neighbor. Would you think that would be a great way to kind of, you know, an instant way, in fact, to build empathy, compassion, consideration within somebody else for you?
As a similar saying goes, Aaron, similar situation, but the stomach is the fastest way to the heart, right? And it's really easy to reach out to people like that. And you never know, sometimes people are struggling with food, especially during COVID when people don't have a lot of food at home, but you never know who needs it. And when you give it, then that really warms the heart, both literally and figuratively.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone's willing to give you their food, that's basically the same as sitting at the same dinner table with them.
Right,
and what is more
exactly.
familiar than sitting with someone at the same table and eating food?
Now, before we wrap this up, Ghassan, do you have any advice or anything that we could do to, I mean, I've shared quite a few, I've talked my mind off over here, but do you have any advice or something that the viewers can take away, something that I could learn from as well, and inshallah, something that can make our community better than what it is, maybe improve it to whatever aspect it is, and, you know, help us see a better future?
I think the most important thing we need to start with is to start becoming more familiar with our families. When we sit down, we turn off the TV, we put our phones aside, and we just listen to each other and we share our thoughts, our day. And when you become familiar with your family and you have those interactions with your family, you're going to want to interact with people as well, because you're going to want to know what's going on in people's minds when you're not occupied with your phones and with the TV and all that information load. Then it's putting you forward to developing a better relationship with your community, starting with your closest community, which is your family.
Jazakallahu khairan, Ghassan, for being on the show today. Thank you very much for speaking with me. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion, and inshallah, I hope to see you again on the show.
Inshallah.
So, to your viewers, the modern community, does it have issues? Can things be better? Was it the same as it is in the past to today? Think about it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.